Vijay Mallya's extradition has finally moved one step closer now that the UK High Court has dismissed the appeal which he filed against the sort of 2018 order of the UK lower courts, which had recommended his extradition and sent the thing up to the UK Home Secretary. Now, this order was passed by the High Court yesterday on Monday, 20th April. And it's a very important thing because this was pretty much Mallya's last big chance and his real big hope for trying to prevent his extradition back to India from the UK. But does that mean that Mallya has no options left? And what's the likelihood of him being extradited back to India within 28 days, as some people have speculated? Let's try and quickly answer those questions. In terms of the first thing, does Mallya still have any options left? Well, he does have one option left, which is an appeal to the UK Supreme Court. The UK Supreme Court has the ability to hear an appeal against this kind of decision passed by the UK High Court. But the good news is that unlike the Indian Supreme Court, which takes up a lot of these kind of cases and hears so many different appeals and so many PILs and all those, pretty much anything which comes before it, the UK Supreme Court is very, very restricted in terms of what it hears. There has to be a very big issue of law which has to be argued in a particular case for the UK Supreme Court to take it up. Now, in this case, Mallya has to be able to show that there is a question of law of general public importance. Otherwise, the UK Supreme Court won't take it up. Now, Mallya has one potential ground to try and argue that. He will be saying that, look, the legal standard applied by the Westminster Magistrates Court back in 2018 when they recommended his extradition, when they found that there was a prima facie case against him, that standard for assessing whether there was a basic case made out by the Indian authorities for his extradition, that standard of law applied was incorrect. However, the UK High Court has found that argument is pretty baseless, that there is very clear precedent which shows that the standard which was used by the judge was correct. So it is quite possible that the UK Supreme Court will say, look, even though you're trying to say there is an issue of law of general public importance here, we don't really see that way. The law is very clear. There's no real dispute over all of it. Now, that's obviously he's going to be trying to do that. And as I said, unlikely that the Supreme Court will take it up, but you never really know. Now, he has 14 days to file that appeal before the UK Supreme Court. And then after that, the court will first decide whether it's going to hear the case or not. And then if it does decide to take up the case, you could be seeing several months before that matter gets heard. But in the event that, they don't decide to take it up, that's obviously going to then shorten the timeline quite a bit. At the same time, the 28-day timeline which you're hearing, that's probably something which is not going to happen. And that's pretty much basically, you've got this 14-day time for him to file an appeal. Then you've got the whole coronavirus crisis going on. That's going to create a bit of a delay. And, it doesn't immediately mean that the extradition formalities will take place, because it goes back to the UK Home Secretary, who has to sort of pass the order, and only once the UK Home Secretary passes the order does that 28-day period come into play. Now, at this time, again, we could have been looking at a situation where the UK Home Secretary may not have looked favorably on this, but the good news again for India is that back in February 2019, then UK Home Secretary Sajid Javid had already approved of the extradition. So we're unlikely to see any change there from the new Home Secretary, Preeti Patel. The only possible snag in the works is that even when the UK Home Secretary has this sort of decision pretty much made and all the legal formalities are delayed, there have been cases where they've deferred the extradition, like for instance Tiger Hanif. All his options were exhausted back in 2013, but he still hasn't yet been extradited. However, the good news again is we don't really see that in Mallya's case. So given the sort of strength of legal opinion by how the UK lower court held what it did and said there was a prima facie case, and that the way that the High Court has emphatically said that was absolutely correct, it's unlikely though that we'd see any real delays. We should be therefore expecting Mallya's extradition to India in a matter of months. The only span in the works is if that UK Supreme Court case goes forward, but as we said, that's unlikely to happen.